Folks, how y'all doing today? Now folks, the liberal chickens are coming home to roost, and I'm wondering who will clean up the droppings. For decades, the liberal lunatics have appeased the black masses in the urban inner city, and for decades the blacks have steadily become more violent, barbarous, and retrograde. Now here I'd like to point out that we could substitute Muslim or most any brown horde for black, and the effect is much the same. The liberals have for decades insisted that this entire phenomena is caused by structural racism and patriarchy and other inane nonsense isms of all sorts of various stripes and kinds. The simple short is that it is our fault. Whitey did it all. Since it is an axiom of their belief system, such as it is, that no colored equal can be held equally accountable for their own failure, and thus evil white male people had to have caused their problems. See, it's so simple. Now, this is their actual logic. Now, the truth is that for decades it has been patently obvious that the problem is the blacks themselves. The problem is the insane social engineering experiment called welfare. And frankly, the source of the entire problem is the liberal do-gooders who have no clue about how reality actually works. The reality is that while white males of the working and middle class mainly pay for this failed experiment, such as it is, the politically correct subversives have ended up gaining a voting bloc to use as a battering ram against traditional society morals and values. In essence, what has happened is that these liberal do-gooders and their minority voters have banded together to make Whitey pay for them to beat Whitey down. It's very simple. These three factors, the barbarian blacks, the idiotically contrived welfare state, and the clueless liberal white yuppie, have conspired, frankly, to destroy the Western world and replace it with a 2.0 version of itself that is realistically impossible. Their utopian matriarchy is not in line with reality and thus must of necessity implode. You see, it is impossible, as all viable societies are, have been, and will always be patriarchal to some extent. They always have hierarchies. This is just reality. People have differing abilities. And they always will rely upon authority and respect for elders, traditions, and values. This is simply how it is. Societies without these qualities disintegrate quickly. Thus, the lunatic liberals have conspired to destroy, but they have no possibility of ever creating anything in the place of that which they have destroyed, and destroyed they have. We've seen this insanity let loose on society since sometime in the late 50s, early 60s, when subversive liberals, Marxists, communists actually, took over the media academia and started to enforce their perverse worldview and values upon the rest of us through legislation and social conditioning. It accelerated in the 70s and 80s as these liberal egalitarian Marxists, again tree-hugging, clueless fools, entered the halls of power in force and began to write public policy that enforced their inane, insane, ridiculous, colorblind worldview upon the rest of us. It has reached the point where the brake no longer functions and the train is doomed, just chugging along at terminal velocity. This can be shown by the fact that in at least one country in the Western world, a openly subversive communist has been given his own personal named holiday. I reference, of course, Martin Luther King, the famous American communist subversive. This holiday was put into place because of riots and chimp-outs. These riots and chimp-outs that we see in the streets are merely the symptoms of an internal disease. This internal disease, of course, was the first rumblings of political correctness, enforced egalitarianism, enforced tolerance, and the benefits of diversity. Those that accept these dogmatic tenets of the death pact called modernity are sick, morally and spiritually sick, since all of those terms, political correctness, egalitarianism, tolerance, diversity, in practical application mean less Western white male society and more urban inner city culture, more ghetto thug culture, as well as more never ending new citizens from the most alien, barbarous, and poor, wretched, vile places imaginable. Again, all this without end until we, the majority, are a minority in our own nations, and until we have no power over the nation our fathers built, and then we can be simply disposed of like unwanted house guests. Verily, only those with no life and who are near upon death could be so willfully careless about the survival of their kind or the future of their own person and children. Now, to put all this in perspective, the people of the West tolerate these chimp outs because they're afraid to be called a word: racist, fascist, xenophobic. By other people on the left who are physically weak and effeminate. What does that make them exactly? They sit around and watch their neighborhoods go to the dogs, as the saying used to go, merely so that they can have trinkets and baubles while they avoid being called a name: racist, fascist, xenophobe. Why would anyone else respect us when we don't respect ourselves? We allow politically correct communist subversives to diversify our nations, even though diversity means less of us in our own nations and more of foreign outlander barbarians. Who can have even the most fleeting respect for such weakling people as us? Seriously. And this is why the blacks riot whenever they feel like it. This is why the other invaders simply come when they feel like it. This is why the Mexicans invade our lands with impunity. This is why every other form of minority has us, the majority, lawful citizens of our nations, afraid to say boo in our own homes at them. This is why a tiny minority of sodomites and other disgusting people have forced themselves upon us. It is because we don't respect ourselves enough or trust in anything like higher values enough to stand up against political correctness, diversity, and so called equality. We lack the courage to tell the people who push it to push off and stay out. We have made a pact with death, and thus we are dying. It is because we have spiritually died inside that these people are running riot over our body as it rots. And thus, the Marxist liberal chickens are coming home in force. Those of you who do not wish for these chickens to make a mess of your home, of your hearth, of your heritage, will do well to find others who value hearth, heritage, white Western majority traditions, band together with them at the local level, and sidestep the parties, the market, and these social justice warriors' rules. Simply create your own person to person, peer to peer communities that are outside and beyond their control. Thank you.